Good morning. Thank you for coming. Very early, eh? Okay, thank you so much for having come again. This time is like the fourth session. Wow, that means 1 month of doing Friday Pramana sessions. That's cool. Time flies. Okay, there is okay, cool. At the meeting, I made Gina and Adam co-host, so you guys can as well. If for whatever reason I don't notice new attendance coming, you could help me to accept them. And thank you so much to all the translators and recorders and volunteers. Thank you so much that you have been helping us. And just trying to figure out some technical things. Just 1 minute. Thank you so much. I'm going to. Okay, cool. It's basically a message that Adam needs to restart his computer and he will be joining in a moment. Okay, so let's start because then I'm going to be complaining that time run out. Today, first, I want to really thank as well all the people who has been asking questions, because as I say in the past sessions, your questions help us to build the content. Sometimes you may ask something and maybe the answer doesn't come right away in the chat, but it helps Adam and I to start thinking about how to approach those topics. And to be very honest, sometimes your questions trigger questions on me as well. So I'm very grateful because then you give me the chance as well to learn new things. One of the questions that you guys asked, I had to first ask Adam and then start doing research. And then I start asking other people. And we're going to talk about it. But last night, I was even excited that even the people I was asking, they were also saying to be honest, they also have questions about it. So I like this idea that as a group, as a big family of Dharma friends, we are trying to find truth together. So when you come here, don't think like I'm gonna have all the answers. Maybe come more with this idea that we are exploring reality together. So that's very cool to me, really, because it's fun and exciting as well. We are helping each other. Okay. Let's just bring for a moment, just briefly, 1-2 minutes, our motivation in general. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we here? What we want to do with it? How this ideal world, ideal reality looks for each one of us, and try to offer as well this beautiful, perfect world to everyone. and as well take refuge or feel at peace knowing that everything we do, everything we say, everything we think has effects in our world, in our reality. And that because everything is empty, we have the chance to design purposely and consciously this reality to be better. So we can do something about it, and that's refuge. Sometimes it's really difficult because some situations seems very impossible. We may feel very powerless, but I mean, if really this system is correct, then there is something we can do about it. And I don't know about you, but really for me, even sometimes thinking about the permanent existence of the mind kind of calms me down, knowing that, I mean, we are not really very encouraged to think this way. We are supposed to think that we're gonna try our best, we're gonna make it this lifetime. That's how we should practice. But also sometimes it helps me to think like my existence is not limited to one lifetime, and a lifetime is just more like, if we could see our lifetimes as years, let's say, like, I mean, there is a chance to fix the world and reality that over builds up life after lifetime, and then death is only mm, a process of change. You know what I'm saying? It's just something. Okay, it's like I'm gonna move to a new house. I'm just moving houses, but the plan is the same basically. Sometimes that gives me kind of peace, and I'm like, okay, there is time. Just keep moving steady. At the same time, we are supposed to try to do it quick, fast in this lifetime. So quick, fast. Let's move on to the topic of today. Let me share my screen with you. And okay, so I want to start with one of the questions that I talked about. And it was very cool. There is a few questions that inspired me to present some content this session. And one of them had to do with the outline of existence, the outline of existent things. So we were talking about that last time there was like some changing and unchanging things. So we basically have like the outline of existence, everything that exists, right? And in order to be able to measure or to ascertain existence, in order to have like a pramana of what's going on, we start making categories and divisions just to organize everything. Everything we put it in different shelves to have access to it, to be, measuring it precisely and well, and we know what everything is. So what we do is we divide things, and the very first division, traditionally speaking, is things that change and things that don't change. Well, number one, you will say it's all existing things. And here I'm hinting a little bit because you may ask, you may wonder, what about things that don't exist? Are those things in your shelf? All right, then I will say no. In this case, we are only working with things that exist, which in a way, it's already opening room for interesting debates, right? But the question basically was something like to say, we were talking about sorry, there is like a guy with a bell going out in my door. In the street. I don't know if you were able to hear it, but
No, I didn't hear
okay, cool. Good to see you, Adam.
Yeah, man.
So yeah, basically last session we mentioned that some things that are unchanging, for example, they could be like archetypes or certain kinds of facts, truths. And then the question was to say that, let me see, I have it here. I'm going to read it. So usually we were considering concepts and archetypes to be unchanging, but then somebody asked if that's correct, and there is a part in the foundation courses 13, foundation courses number 13 in class 2. It is true, I went to check, and it's basically the outline of existence. Geshe Michael is talking about, yes, on changing things, and then changing things are divided into 3 categories, which are physical things, mental things, and things that are not physical and not mental. Then there is a part that Geshe goes deep into this idea. Maybe Adam can help us with more information a little later. The Demanduchis. Geshe goes like for 10 minutes and talk about Demanduchis. And basically it says that it refers to concepts like a person or person, right? And he says that those things are changing. To be honest, it confused me a little bit because I always thought that these kind of concepts could be interpreted as archetypes, and I'm still not very clear on what's the difference. But we are digging about it. So today we're going to explore, okay, the outline of existence. Cool. Can you see my PPT? Beautiful. Okay, so also there were some fun activity yesterday in the chat where there is another question that came up that had to do with how do we define a real thing? And then I remember there was like many different interactions, but I wrote at some point in the chat, like, I'm going to adventure and say this time that everything that exists is real. One of the reasons I say that is because during the outline of existence, when we are studying this topic, we have, let's say, even before entering the diagram, we have this idea of, okay, we're going to talk about things that exist. So we have 2 things, things that exist and things that don't exist. Super important when we are exploring concepts and pramana be able to be on the same page with the person we are talking or having the discussion with. And sometimes that person is ourselves. So even for ourselves, it's very important to have very clear definitions. What's the thing that we are referring to when we name it? So for these purposes, for having ourselves very clear understanding of what we're talking about, and also establishing very clearly for the other person, if that's the case, what we're talking about, definitions are crucial, super, super important. The joke yesterday was like, I don't know, your partner comes or whoever, your mom, and say, okay, please make sure you make a reservation for a good restaurant tomorrow. And if you don't ask many questions, super high possibility of trouble. Okay, yes, I'll do a reservation for a good restaurant, no problem. I mean, many times because of convention, because we know each other very well, or the person you are talking with, you know each other very well, almost subconsciously, we already agree on what a good restaurant means. But remember what we were saying the other day about giving your ideas a certificate? I don't know if you remember this idea. It was because of out of convention, we accept so many things subconsciously, almost like we don't examine them. And many times we may be correct, but there is a slight difference between checking them still and very consciously approving them, giving them a certificate. Maybe the thing that you thought it's a good restaurant, it's going to be accepted by your partner as a good restaurant. But if you want to be sure, maybe just examine the idea real quick. One of the ways to do this is just to ask them, okay, wait, what do you mean by good restaurant? Oh, I mean that it has gluten-free options because my mom is joining and she's gluten-free. Gluten-free. Oh, okay. Because I was just gonna choose something else, right? I was taking a good restaurant to be something with great desserts and great prices. Oh, no. What I mean good restaurant is a restaurant where my mom can go and order some gluten-free dishes. Ah, okay, great. So same phrase, same word, same concept, different meaning. Okay, great. So existent things. We need to know what's the definition of existence. Existent things, check this out, is anything that can be perceived. Anything that can be perceived by a pramana. Do you guys remember what a pramana is? Like basically a correct, valid perception. But now, in a way, I'm tricking you because sometimes we give half definitions or incomplete definitions. And Geshe says often that a good debater, as soon as you give them a definition, starts looking for counter examples in their mind. So let me ask you something. Can you think of an example of something that you cannot perceive that still exists? If I say the definition of existence is anything that you can perceive with a pramana. remember we also study the three kinds of Pramana, like when you are overwhelmed by negative emotions or something is obstructing or limiting your senses, or perceptions under the influence of drugs, alcohol, stuff like that, hallucinations. So somebody could say like, well, if that's your definition, I don't know, the the yellow fish that it's swimming at the bottom of a beach in Australia, that doesn't exist because I'm not perceiving it with a pramana right now. Or a super classical example, the tree, the tree that falls down in the forest that nobody is there around to hear, it doesn't exist. Why? Because there is nobody there to hear it. Okay, so to me, this idea made me uncomfortable for so long, really, and created a lot of debates between us when we were studying these topics in Guadalajara. I don't know, maybe like 10 years ago. But guess what? Let's go back to the definition of existence. Anything that can be perceived, and this is a super important question, ask by whom? And the definition say by an omniscient being. Imagine that. Now we are talking about like, okay, anything that an omniscient being can perceive can be established as existing. Wow. So ask yourself, can an omniscient being perceive more things than me? First, ask yourself if you are omniscient, because I don't know if you are omniscient. But I have to ask myself, am I omniscient? And then I say, no, I am not. Why not? How can I tell that I'm not omniscient? Because there are many things that I don't know. Easy proof. I have some questions in my life. I have a lot of questions in my life. That proves I am not omniscient. Okay, so anything that exists can be perceived by an omniscient being. Anything that can be perceived by an omniscient being can be established as existence. So, is there such thing as a tree that falls in the middle of the forest and nobody hears?
Yes.
Or no? Well, maybe. I mean, theoretically speaking.
Well, I think that the answer that I've heard is that a Buddha perceives it, right?
Correct. Yes. So there is no such thing as a tree that falls in the forest and nobody hears. Because if a tree falls in the forest, a Buddha will hear it. In the sense that they can perceive directly every existing thing in the universe, including.
Sorry, I misunderstood what you're saying. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think you
Yeah.
flip it, but I knew you flip it. Okay, cool. Just keep track. So when we are talking about a real thing, somebody else in the chat, Ina wrote in the chat yesterday a question. Is there anything that exists that is not real? And then I thought that's a great question, because if we say yes, that will mean that things that don't exist are real. Or we will say as well that certain things that exist are not real. And that will be a crazy statement, I think. So now, another thing that I've been encouraging people to think about or remember is that in this game of Pramana, there are many different levels and approaches called schools of thought, right? We have different schools of philosophy, different schools of Pramana in a way, because each school has its own system to establish reality. And we talked about the idea that different schools offer you with different ideas and different solutions, but not all of these ideas are accepted by all different schools. But at the same time, a lot of them, yes, are accepted by all schools. So in a way, our task as Pramana students or Pramana liking people, the better we become experts to identify every system, every school, and its ideas, and to categorize them, the much better job we're going to be able to do to understand our reality. So step by step, little by little, we're going to be getting familiar with what ideas do we have, which is super important, what tools do we have, but also even those tools to be able to categorize them and put them into the school they belong or the school they come from. Okay, so now that we talked about the definition of existence, everything that can be perceived by an omniscient being. Let's talk about these three big categories of objects depending on how accessible they are. And you may be very familiar with this idea. 3 levels. Evident, accessible reality. Colors and shapes, for example, food, taste, things that we can access with our senses. It's like conventional reality, evident reality, many times called. Okay. Next level. This is hidden reality. I gave you some examples of evident, accessible reality, color, shapes, food, sounds, feelings, things that we can see, things that are there for us to access pretty much immediately. Then there is another level of reality called hidden reality. And yesterday I was doing some research. I like it that it can be also called inferential knowable things that we can get to know by using reasoning, for example, or logic, are inside this category of things. Classical examples, empty space. For example, the reason you could sit in this chair is because there is no other person sitting in that chair. Is that kind of empty space that it's not, for example, the space that is between walls. It's not like that physical space. It's more the empty space that is not obstructing existence, if that makes sense. And another classical example is emptiness, really. I put a white screen because sometimes Geshe uses this idea to explain emptiness. It's like a white screen waiting for us to input our projections on it. So it's like to say, in a way, reality or the world is like a white screen. We will talk about that later, but it's like very cool, this idea of like we can talk about emptiness and its parts when we talk about this idea of, okay, is the world one thing or many things? Can we approach like the emptiness of the world as one thing? Or if we divide the world in parts, like all different countries, then every country has its own emptiness. Every country is one element that makes up the world, but at the same time, the world has its emptiness as one, and each country has its emptiness as one as well. So can we say that all these emptinesses together, the emptinesses of each country, are part of the emptiness of the world? And that's very interesting. We will explore that idea later. But right now we are talking about the levels of reality that we can access: accessible, direct, evident reality, hidden reality, or inferential knowledge reality, and then super hidden reality, right? Examples of these are like cause and effect, or subtle aspects of cause and effects, or information. Like, for example, if we see a wall like this, what we have to agree with is like there is a reason why every single little detail of this wall is like that for us. I mean, and I don't mean for you to get crazy about it, but it's actually could be the case that somebody could ask you, what karma did you plant it, or why is that exactly the number 564 little square on the screen has like a little stain of red, but why the next one a little bit under doesn't has a little stain of red? And what are 1,384,074 little squares compounding the wall? Well, maybe it's one of those answers that the Buddha will say, like, only me or only like me will know that. I'm not saying that for me. I'm just saying like that's what the Buddha will say. But in theory, there is a reason why exactly this little line of white is a little bit thicker than the others. But those things are so hidden that only like an omniscient being or like a super realized being will be able to tell. Interesting. Check this idea that this is even more difficult to access than inferential, hidden reality, emptiness, and empty space, for example, things like that. This is even a deeper level of hidden reality. But okay, we're almost close with this presentation. It's gonna be Adam's time, so I'm gonna move on just for 2 more minutes, a little faster. Very important. I want you guys to ask yourselves as well. When we are talking about these 3 levels of reality, what's a very important question that could be a game changer? 3 levels of reality: evident, hidden, super hidden. Ask me something that is gonna like put us everything into peace. What's the must you should be asking if somebody's talking about the 3 levels of reality? Yes, I read the chat. To whom?
Yeah.
That's like beautiful question. Because I don't know if any of you have read the book Catherine.
Yeah.
I had the chance of, I don't know when, maybe like a year ago, Geshe was doing a recording, voice recording, like audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And he took us through a beautiful chapter where the girl Friday is having a debate at the Geshe court. And this super important idea comes up. Then later, Geshe has expressed that actually the inspiration on this debate came from his own Geshe debate. And it was one of the most successful debates he ever had, when he had to talk about the outline of existence, the levels of reality, of access. And this question comes up, and many people got surprised about, because it's true. Let's put it this way: for us humans, these levels of reality are like this. But even evident things for me could be hidden for other people. An example that I have here is like even colors, for example. Geshe talked to Adam and I about this idea that some people have, what's the name of this when they don't perceive colors very well?
Color blindness.
Yeah, color blindness. And for me, maybe whatever, color red could be a super evident, accessible reality. And for other people, could be hidden. They cannot see it. But maybe if then they later, I don't know, meditate a lot of whatever, develop some special CDs, maybe they could change their perceptions and all of a sudden see something that was hidden before for them. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, like for let's say for an enlightened being, even these things like what we were talking about, cause and effect and the subtle details of karma, for them are like super evident. It's clear, it's there. Maybe that's why teachers can see our own problems easy like that. They just see your face and they know exactly what are your problems, what are you doing wrong, but we ourselves cannot see it. It's often that for us, our own problems or defects are more very hidden, and for our teachers is like super clear how we are messing up, right? So God bless our teachers.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna keep exploring these ideas because really we are just about to start with the outline of existence, talking about changing, unchanging. Then later we're gonna talk about um, definitions. There is a whole thing, a lot of things to say about definitions and definiendums. We're gonna start exploring um, synonyms, but today I think it's time to pass the torch to Adam. And
Okay.
thank you very much. Keep sharing your questions in the chat. Some of them I don't know, and I have to explore and ask and investigate more. But that's a great material to grow together as a Pramana group. Okay, I'm gonna pass the thing to you, Adam.
Cool. Can you also give me an admin status so I can share a picture
Ah, okay,
in
yeah.
the chat?
Co-host.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this over there. Um, it's still saying I can't share a screenshot.
Okay, one moment.
Um,
Not
okay.
yet. Let's.
Try it again. No, it's okay though. Yeah, I don't want to get bogged down here. Uh, yeah, so Juan sent me a text message to remind myself to go slow again. Yeah, so Juan sent a text message, and there were kind of two questions, I think. The first was identifying the difference between gross and subtle impermanence, right? And I think the easiest way to really think about gross impermanence is if you take a coffee cup and you drop it on the ground, right? You see it shatter. That's a very clear example of gross impermanence, right? So subtle impermanence is a little bit more it's a little bit more tricky. I don't think it's difficult to understand intellectually, but perceiving it directly is one of the hardest things that you can do as a meditator. So, when you think about subtle impermanence, you have to think about really objects on a timeline, right? So, sorry, got something in my throat here. um, you have to think about objects on a timeline. So if you've got, let's say, like a coffee cup, and it's at the factory, and you take its handle and you put the handle on the coffee cup, right? You can then say that, okay, this is now a coffee cup. And then each moment that that individual coffee cup continues, um, you can think of like a little slice of time, right? Like a coffee cup is not just made up of its physical characteristics, like its color and its shape, the way that it feels, right? But it's also made up of its individual moments as well. Um, so, in order to answer the question, we have to look at the nature of objects, and really, and how do you define a coffee cup? Okay. Um, so reality, right? We've been talking about reality, and I asked you guys last week to think about what you consider to be real. Yeah. So in the second school, let's go back. In the first school, okay, in the Abhidharma school, you define reality as being made up of particulate matter, right? The 8 different types of matter. And these are the 4 great elements, and then 4 objects of the sense consciousness. Okay. They leave out sound because they say that sound is more, it's very, what the English word would be ephemeral, right? It's, it very quickly goes away. Okay. Um, and so you've got these 8 different types of matter that they would consider to be like atoms, right? And all these things come together into a single atom. Okay. So every atom of any given object is made up of these 8 different qualities, right? And everybody's heard about the 4 great elements. And if you've gone through the ACI courses, Geshe Michael defines them. So in the first school, what is considered real are atoms, these things that are composed of these 8 different aspects, these 8 different qualities, and individual moments of awareness. Okay. So the way you got to think about this is that from the perspective of the second school and the first school, that any object, when you perceive it, triggers your awareness. Okay. So the perception of an object triggers your consciousness. Okay. So what's going on around you is all of these things that you see are made up of these molecules, these atoms that comprise molecules, and these molecules come together to then make bigger objects, right? So these atoms are interplaying with your consciousness. Okay. That's why they describe reality as being made up of the 8 different types of matter, right? Or the 8 different types of so let's just say atoms. Okay. So you have atoms, and then you have consciousness that's being triggered by it each moment, moment to moment to moment. And Geshe Michael has defined this as being, 65 seeds per moment. So why am I talking about this, and why did we have to have some context? Because we're trying to define subtle impermanence. Okay. So when you think of any given object and you think of how it's comprised, it has 2 different aspects, doesn't it? Right? It has the 8 qualities that make up every atom, and then it's comprised of also its lifespan. Okay. So what does a single moment look like? Okay. So we're tricked all day. We're tricked into thinking that coffee cups exist um, as a solid thing, right? Like if you see a tree and okay, you come back to the same tree. Maybe it's a tree in your yard at the house that you grew up in, and you go back to visit your parents and you see that same tree and you say, "Oh, this is the tree that was in the yard when I was growing up." However, it's not the same tree. Okay. That's the point, right? So any given object is not the same object from moment to moment. Okay. When you look at a river, the river's changing constantly, right? That river is not the same river every moment that you look at it. Okay. However, you look at that river and you think you're looking at the same river, don't you? Right? So this is one of the qualities of subtle impermanence that you will only see if you learn how to slow your mind down in deep states of meditation. And this is the point at which you will see a seed, as Geshe Michael has described it, pop out of your mind and overlay upon any given object. It's at that point that you understand, oh, not only am I creating this object, but I'm creating it in every moment. Okay. So ever how many people here have gone through course 13? I know Andreas is in the middle of it. Yeah. Or he's leading a study group with it right now. Uh, and sorry for not getting back to your Telegram. I don't log into it that much, that often. Um, but I'm going to start because I see that people are interacting in it, and it's really beautiful. So I want to be a part of it. Um, so if you go through course 13, right, Geshe Michael describes each individual moment, or let's think of it this way. Um, if you say that something starts, right, or you say that something stops, that implies that something has this gradual buildup, right? In the same way that if you ring a bell, right, the bell is very loud at first, but then it kind of gradually recedes. Yeah. Um, but we say that moments aren't like this. Moments don't gradually start and stop. They come into existence and they go out of existence, right? And there's a difference there. So this is the subtle part of subtle impermanence, okay? That each individual moment as it comes into existence is coming into existence and it's going out of existence. It doesn't get any bigger or any smaller. Okay. Why is that important? So, if you think about any individual moment, and this is a question that I hope gets everyone here thinking, okay, if you can say that an individual moment of any given object is unchanging because it doesn't start and it doesn't stop, okay, does that mean that individual moments are unchanging? That's really interesting, right? If something comes into existence and it doesn't change during that moment, by definition, it would be unchanging. So I pose to you that this might be an interesting quality to consider, as that may be, and I'm not saying it is, but this is something that I'm struggling with, and it's a deep question because my spiritual journey has led me to trying to find where changing things interface with unchanging things. Okay. Like if you've heard Geshe Michael give explanations about how the mind creates seeds, right? He's gotten lately, he's been saying that the coffee cup and the mental image of the coffee cup are actually the same thing. Okay. So I try to find where where do changing things and unchanging things meet? Where are they interfacing? Right? And one of the things that I've thought about is maybe it's in this study of subtle impermanence, because we just went through how things are comprised on these timelines. And if you think of a smallest moment, right, then that smallest moment would have to be unchanging because it comes into existence and goes out of existence without changing. Okay. So I think that's something to explore, something to think about. At least I find it interesting. I'm not I'm not saying that you have to. Um, but and how's my language, guys? I'm trying not to use like big words um, because I don't want to confuse anybody. Um, Yeah, I could be stuck in second school. But that's also for the context of this class, right? We were kind of talking beforehand, or Juan was kind of talking. If you're going to discuss any object, it's hard to jump between the schools. And something that I found quite fascinating is that um, because when you hear Geshe Michael give a really good explanation on emptiness, right? Everybody likes to think, oh, well, I'm prasangika now, you know? However, what I've heard presented is that you can't consider yourself to be a member of any given school until you've realized that school's understanding of emptiness, okay, in a deep state of meditation. So once you see emptiness from the perspective of the Abhidharma school, well, then you can say that you're an Abhidharmist or a Sautrantika, right? Or a mind only, right? So uh, that's why, yeah, it can be very hard to discuss these things um, if you don't really get stuck in any given school before you start the discussion. Um, so that should clear up the difference between impermanence and subtle impermanence. Okay. If you take a coffee cup and you throw it on the ground, you see it shatter. That's gross impermanence. Subtle impermanence is when you start analyzing any given object from the perspective of a single instant. Okay. And not just understanding that, but understanding the qualities and the characteristics of that moment. So you're not just, okay, I understand that things are changing. And even from a scientific perspective, there are electrons that are being broken. There are these little bonds that are being broken, right, within this object every instant. So even from a scientific perspective, this thing is decaying and it's not the same thing from moment to moment. But go far beyond that, right? That's an intellectual understanding. You got to really start focusing in on and thinking about the details, right? And the qualities of a given instant. Okay. And maybe that could be something to think about over the next week. And it made me so happy to hear that everybody was discussing um, what it means to be real, because that was the last question that I asked you guys. And that's kind of what I was hoping everybody would think about over the next week or over last week. And that's because one of the things that we wanted to go through this week was how to, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the reminder. um, I get into a flow, and I'm sorry. Yeah. Um, yeah, so there was also a question Andreas had. That was the first question that was in the Telegram group was subtle impermanence versus gross impermanence. And Andreas had an interesting question in relation to um, the third category of changing things, okay, and how they differ from unchanging things that you may consider archetypes or mental images, right? And where do those two things differ? Okay. What, okay, so why is a person considered to be a changing thing, which is neither physical nor mental? Okay. Okay. So if I ask you guys for a different definition of a person, okay, not which category they belong to, but what would be the definition of a person? Okay. And feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in. I love it when I hear people interacting. Makes me feel like you're listening. um, so what would be the definition of a person? Okay. Well, a person is somebody who is made up of the five aggregates, the five skandhas. Okay. That's a person. A person has those five qualities. Okay. Every person. Okay. Is everybody familiar with the five heaps? Yeah. The five skandhas. Okay. So if a person is comprised of those five things, then they have five different parts, don't they? Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at, well, let's go back first to the first category, and we're going to get around to why dim and duce is different from takpa, right? So the first category of changing things, everybody knows, matter, right? It's physical matter, right? Stuff, substance, okay? And every object within that group is going to have different parts, isn't it? A coffee cup is going to have its colors, coffee cup's going to have its shapes, coffee cup's going to have a handle, right? Um, Now, what I'm trying to point out to you here, okay, is things that belong to the first group have parts, don't they? They have to, okay? Things that belong to the second group, mental things, consciousness. I just showed you also how things that belong to the second group also have different parts. Why? Because we say that consciousness is made up of both sim and simjung, mind and mental factors, right? So things that belong to the first group has parts. Things that belong to the second group also have parts because you have main mind and you have secondary mind. Okay. And each one of those things can be further divided. So now we're going to jump to that third group. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Kashin. Thank you. Um, so things that belong to the third group must also have parts. Okay. Now, what would be those parts? You could say, hi, hey, babe. You could say it's a combination. Okay. Do you want to wave? Look. So things that belong to that third group are going to be composed of, okay, first, you can break that third group down. Okay. That third group can be broken down into persons, things that are people, and things that are not people. Okay. So even that third group can be further broken down. So what we're going to look at is what Andreas was questioning. Okay. We're going to look at the first group of the third group of changing things. Okay. And within that first group of the third group, you have people. Okay. And people can be broken down into anybody? Their body and their mind. Okay. And in classical Western philosophy, this is called the mind-body problem. Okay. From a Western perspective, this is still not addressed. Okay. People in philosophy rooms and in cognitive science departments at all the major universities are still struggling with this question. Okay. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be a person? What does it mean to have both a mind and a body? And how do those two things interact? Okay. So when we look at, when we look at, okay, we said that people have five different parts, don't they? Right? They have the five skandhas. Okay. So what we're looking at is how every group within changing things has to be made of parts. Okay. And your mind necessarily ties together cup, doesn't it? Your mind ties together its color, its shape, the way that it feels, right? Its function also, right? Of holding liquid. Okay. And you call that a coffee cup. Okay. Your mind does the same thing with the third group. Okay. It takes, okay. Are things that are, and you got to excuse me, it's clunky to explain these things because I'm trying to use language that I'm not used. I talk and I use bigger words when I think to myself about these things. So I'm learning how to try to be. I'm learning how to speak in a different way. So bear with me, okay? The first group, okay? Everything in the first group is just comprised of substance, of physical matter. Everything, everything in that first group of changing things can only be physical matter. Everything within the category of that second group of changing things can also only be consciousness or mind. Okay. And the third group is comprised of things that are a combination of both. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we get to the question of how you can label yourself Andreas. How can you label yourself Juan? How do I label my daughter as Ava? Right? And when I apply that label to it, does that necessarily make it an unchanging thing? Okay. And the reason I just went through this line of reasoning, that I just used a line of reasoning to establish the point that I'm about to make. Okay. You do the same when you label a cup, does it become an unchanging thing? Do you see my point? Okay. So just because you label a cup does not make the cup an unchanging thing. Okay. And just because you label the combination of mind and matter as being Lubov or being Kadran or being Juan, right, does not make it an unchanging thing. Okay. And you have to understand what it means. This is where we get into something. I'm going to say it really quickly. Mayimba Lelokpa, right? So this means to flip things. Okay. And we're going to spend, when we get to it, we're going to spend a lot of time examining how we form mental images. Okay. And it's something called apoha in Sanskrit. It means the exclusion of everything which is not the thing that you're looking at. We translated it in my first book as being the opposite of everything which is not a coffee cup. Okay. Does this make sense, Ava? She just woke up. So if I say that the opposite of everything which is not a coffee cup, okay, that then becomes a, sorry, thank you. Um, if I say that, if I look at a coffee cup and I say that in order to label this thing coffee cup, I have to go through a process of elimination. I have to say, okay, this is the opposite of everything that is not a coffee cup, meaning that this is a coffee cup. Okay. The reason that I say that is because I'm trying to define to you why there's a difference between Dinmenduche and Takpa, why there's a difference between that third category and being unchanging. In order for something to be unchanging, it has to be a lack. Okay. Now, it has to be a negative phenomenon, a negative in the sense that it's Katya. I see a look on your face that tells me you're highly suspicious of what I'm saying. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I like seeing all you guys. It's really, really fun to see you here. Um, so there's a difference, and there has to be a difference there. Okay. Now, something that, okay, and I'm going to have to get used to not even hitting my PowerPoint slide and getting into the class that I keep preparing for. Now, why is this important? Okay. Because this is another reason, and this is another place at which I think changing and unchanging things begin to meet. Okay. So I addressed first how I think subtle impermanence could be used to step into an understanding of subtle impermanence from the perspective of the higher schools, right? And how some of these topics can be used to see emptiness directly. Okay. Where do changing things become unchanging things? And where do unchanging things interface with changing things? And I think one of those places is subtle impermanence, like we were talking about, and the nature of an individual instant. And I think another one of those things could also be where dim and duces turn into, thank you, turn into maybe changing, unchanging things. Does that make sense? Right? So Andreas is right. Okay. In order to apply a label to something, okay, that does require a mental image because it's the opposite of everything which is not Andreas. Okay. If you say, the way that I had somebody explain this to me was when you think about you, yourself, right? Everybody thinks Adam or Juan or Lubov, right? Everybody thinks to themselves, okay, you say your name to yourself. And that's what I mean by person. Okay. Right. And you are neither your body nor your mind. Okay. But when you apply that label, okay, now you are using an unchanging thing to describe something. Okay. But just because that third category of persons is a collection of both your body and your mind does not make it unchanging. You can think about it like a pile of quarters, or think about a pile of leaves and a pile of rocks, right? Just a big pile with leaves and rocks in it. Okay. You can neither say that that pile is a pile of rocks, and you can't say that that pile is a pile of leaves because it's a pile of both of them. And that's the same concept that you should apply to your body and your mind. Okay. And just because you say that there's a pile of rocks and a pile of leaves, and then you label it pile of rocks and leaves, doesn't then make it unchanging. Okay. Now, it is very, very, Andreas, I can tell you it, I hope you guys keep coming back. Okay. Because I keep promising you that we're going to get into it. Okay. There are reasons why I say what I'm saying. The philosophy behind it takes a little time and a little context. Okay. Um, in order to understand how language creates reality. Okay. And that's from the perspective of the highest middle way. Okay. So language does create reality. But from the perspective of the second school, we have to consider that Pudgaya, or what it means to be a person, right? A person is made of five heaps, and a person is also made of both physical matter and consciousness. Okay, in the same way that a cup is made of, you know, its colors and its shapes. Okay. And maybe that provided a little bit more context. And if it didn't specifically answer your question, Andreas, I'm happy to keep talking with you. And if it didn't answer it, maybe that's something also that you could sit with too. Maybe that's something to take to the cushion. Um, so just briefly, because I work so hard on my PowerPoint, can I show you guys at least before we go? Um, okay. How do I share this thing? There it is. Okay. Oh, not that one. Is it that one? Yeah, it's that one. Let's go here. We're going to play from the current slide. Okay. So the reason that I'm saying that this is so important is because what we define as being real is going to is going to define the way that we look at reality. Okay. Master Dharmakirti says that mental images aren't real. Okay. But when Juan was first started talking about what it means to be real, is that if it can be perceived, right, then it's real. Yeah. But Master Dharmakirti says that mental images aren't. Okay. So this is an important distinction because you start to understand here that the Western Chinese, I mean, there's a group of people we call the Western Chinese who have a system of philosophy that interprets Master Dharmakirti. So within the Geshe program, they define and interpret, they interpret Master Dharmakirti. Um, hey, sweetheart, come here, bring her over here, come show everybody. Okay. um, okay. So you have what the classical Indian schools say, right? Being the Nyaya. And then you have Master Dharmakirti that starts to fight with Zen. Here, come here. Come here. Right. See this guy here.
She is heavy.
This is also a person. um, so this is where we're going to go next. Okay, is we're going to start to explore what does it mean to be real from the perspective of different schools of thought. And through looking at these different schools of thought and analyzing what they hold to be real, hopefully we will be able to we will become more clear about what is real ourselves. Does that make sense? Okay. Can I have, even though I know it's 8:32, can I have 5 more minutes? If you need to go, please feel welcome. I'm not going to be offended. Um, let's see. I'm going to continue to share. Okay. So why is the Nyaya such a big deal in Indian philosophy? Okay. What is the Nyaya school? Okay. The Nyaya school happens to be one of the most influential schools of ancient India. Okay. The Nyaya means the reasoning school. Okay. And most of the other Hindu schools actually different took different ideas from the Nyaya school. Okay. And even though they disagreed about a lot of things, there were certain things that the Nyaya school was presenting that a lot of other schools took and they agreed with them on. So Master Dharmakirti was the same way. Okay. Master Dharmakirti uses their concept of categories. Okay. Which is a big deal. Okay. Because we just went through the outline of existence. And that is a series of categories, groups. Okay. So Master Dharmakirti took that concept of outlining reality from the Nyaya school. Okay. And the Geshe program took that same thing from Master Dharmakirti. So what we study in my first book, Shidrup Kinamshak, that outline of existence is something that we borrow from the Nyaya school. Okay. Which I find pretty fascinating. So it's not that everything they said was wrong. Okay. But Master Dharmakirti does disagree with them about certain things. And he disagrees with the Nyaya school in particular about what to consider real. Okay. The Nyaya school, and this is why I'm so happy that everybody was thinking about this, because it's going to be easier for you guys to understand where this lecture is going. Okay. So, like I said, they were the logic experts of ancient India. Okay. And like I was saying, even their opponents used their system. Okay. And they laid the groundwork for how to analyze things. Okay. Go ahead, sweetheart. Um, Now, you don't need to know the specifics here. Okay. But I'm just putting this up here to be thorough and to give you guys a little detail. So these are the categories that the Nyaya school broke reality down into. Okay. So we've been talking about things like jars or coffee cups. Okay. And people is a big part of our discussion today. Okay. So in the same way that we break things down into changing and unchanging, they have these 6 different things. And the main difference, okay, is that they don't break things into changing and unchanging. They say that everything exists, everything is real. Okay. That even qualities like redness, okay, is something that is real. If you can perceive it, or if you can even describe it with a word or a name, they say that even that is real. Okay. So if it's nameable or if it is describable, they say that it's real and it exists from its own side. Okay. This is where Master Dharmakirti starts to have a pretty strong disagreement with this school. Okay. And the reason that I'm showing you guys this is because this is where the reason that Master Dharmakirti wrote his 7 books was to fight these ideas. Okay? Make sense, everybody? Okay, so what we see, what we talk about really exists. Okay? You have substances like a coffee cup, and that coffee cup is the basis for qualities like being red or being white. Okay? So a jar, this is where it starts to get super, super interesting. Okay? Because they say that a jar isn't just made up of its parts, that in addition to its parts, there actually is a real whole thing. Okay? So when you take all the parts of a pen and you put all the parts of a pen together, okay, and that cap goes on and the ink holder is in its right place, and you have the end that you stick on, that when that thing is assembled as a pen, in addition to all the parts, there is a greater whole. Okay. And this is really interesting what I'm about to say here. Okay. They believe that if you take a pen, okay, and you have all the parts, but you don't put them together, and you take all those individual parts and you put them on a scale, okay, and then you look at the weight and how much each one of those individual parts weighs together, okay, and then you take all those parts off that scale and you put them all together into a pin, and then you put that pin back on the scale, that it would actually weigh more. Does that make sense? Okay, they believe that there is an additional component that goes along with every object. Okay, so this is what Master Dharmakirti was trying to refute. Okay, and is everybody here familiar with the reasoning called Chikdudrel, being one or many? Okay, this is totally. Okay, this is it is a very, very powerful meditational tool. And you can use this to look at the reality, the paradox that exists between parts and wholes, being one or being many. Okay. Now, okay, we talk about identity, right? And what it means for something to be real. Okay. The reason I put this cow up here is because cows are used in Western Chinese books often. K-Drip J uses them in his book, okay, to talk about the opposite of everything which is not a cow and what it means to have cowness. Everybody's heard Geshe Michael talk about penness, right? The quality of being a pen, okay? So these are 5 different ways to think about what it means to be real. Okay. In Western philosophy departments at university, these are 5 different lenses that they use to look at reality. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at each one of these things, and then we're going to identify where Master Dharmakirti, which one of these does Master Dharmakirti accept? And which one of these does Jetson Kappa accept? Do you see? Okay. That's the point of this slide, right? So physical things exist outside of our mind. Okay. This is typically the viewpoint that all of your neighbors and your family members, right? Everybody you see at the post office, the grocery store, okay? They believe this first one. Okay. If they exist the way that they appear to you. Okay. So in the sense that your computer exists independent of your karma and your mind, right? So number 2, ideas like red or cow. Okay. What does it mean to be red What does it mean to have redness? Okay, this is interesting because these are both qualities. Being red or being a cow are things that many different objects share. Okay, different objects can share the quality of being red, right? It's true. Yeah, it's true. Okay, so some people say that these qualities of being red or being a cow are real. Some people say that they're not. Okay. So let's move on to the third one, and we're going to get more into it. This is more just a slide to introduce the ideas. Okay. So that now you have an understanding of all the different ways that people can view what it means to be real. Okay. So we can sometimes see reality directly. What does that mean? Okay. If you have sense perception, well, here, let's step back. I just had an idea. Okay. Everybody right now, if you have your camera on, right, is looking into a camera. Okay. And that camera is picking up these colors and these shapes, right? And it's translating those shapes into different frequencies. And those frequencies are being interpreted and translated into high level computer language, let's say, and then eventually binary. Okay. So you have this. Let me ask you this. Does the microprocessor in your computer see color and shape? No, I don't think we can say, right? Does the camera on your computer see color and shape? You don't think so? Ava says yes. Ava says yes. Okay, the reason I'm saying this, yeah. Who is it? Are you serious? She might just be really, she might just be asleep, sweetie. Um, okay. Sorry. Um, okay. This is really interesting because what, if you understand this number three, okay, you will understand how the second school in Buddhism and flops over into the third school. Okay. The key to understanding how Sautrantika flows into mind only is tied up in this question. Okay. So it's not, this isn't just kind of simple word games. Okay. I'm not just doing this so that I can hear myself talk. Okay. This has a reason. Okay. So can you see reality directly? Okay. And we would say that everybody knows there's a difference between the I sense consciousness, or, excuse me, the awareness of the I, okay, and the I. Okay, cool. Thank you for checking. Um, Here, we'll move on. Let's not get bogged down. We'll talk about it. Okay, we'll talk about it more. Um, so, do we see the world directly? And we would say we don't. Okay. You cannot. Some schools say different. Okay. Now, number four, I thought was interesting because somebody in the chat earlier brought up the fact that they don't perceive other planets with their eye, but they believe that they exist. Okay. That is no different than saying, I can't see an electron or an atom with my eye, but I believe that it exists. Does that make sense? Saying that you can't see an electron with your eye is the same as saying that you can't perceive a distant planet with your eye. However, we say that we believe in both electrons and other galaxies. Okay? That's the meaning of number 4, is that there are certain types of things that exist that are real that you don't perceive directly. Okay? Make sense? Okay. Because you can use things like instruments to perceive them. Okay? So common sense is a guide to truth. This is very Chandrakirti. Very Chandrakirti. Okay? So if you want to see how this applies to Master Chandrakirti uses this idea of what it means to be real in number 5 heavily in the Madhyamaka Avatara, entering the middle way. He uses this heavily. Okay. So what do we want to look at here? Number 1, okay, external things are real. The Nyaya school says yes. Dharmakirti says sometimes. Okay. All right. Okay. Number 2, okay, concepts or ideas like redness or cowness. Okay. The Nyaya says that those are real. Right. Master Dharmakirti says no. All right. Number 3, do we see the world directly? The Nyaya school says yes. Okay. Master Dharmakirti still says no. Okay. This number 4, we call scientific realism. Okay. And the Nyaya, it's not really something they even considered. It wasn't around during their time. And Master Dharmakirti doesn't present anything on this either. Number 5, the everyday objects. Okay, that's what I mean by common sense. Okay, it means everyday objects like the computer you're looking at. Okay, the Nyaya says yes, they exist. Yes, they are real. Master Dharmakirti says it depends. Okay, all right. So once again, I'm just saying this so that if you want to come back and listen to the recordings, you can. Okay. And also to give you some sort of an idea about the different ideas that are held by different cultures. Okay. So why does Master Dharmakirti disagree with the Nyaya? Okay. So just because we think it's real doesn't mean that it is. Okay. Just because you think the quality of being read is real doesn't mean that it is. Okay. Substance. Thank you. Andreas. Beautiful questions. Okay. And the questions of impermanence and subtle impermanence, okay, are tied up in this second one. Okay. The Nyaya school says that substance exists. Okay. That a tree is a tree. Okay. Master Dharmakirti says no. Master Dharmakirti says that a tree is made up of individual moments. Remember? Okay. So it appears to be a river. It appears to be a tree. However, it's not. Okay. It's individual, right? Moments. Okay. So he has a very, very strong reasoning here. Okay. Remember earlier when we were saying that if you take a pin and you have all the individual parts of a pin, and you put them on a scale, right? And then you weigh them. Then you take those pieces off the scale and you put them all together. And now you have a pin that can write. And then you put that pin back on the scale, that it will actually weigh more than it did when it wasn't put together. Because there's this added thing, this whole, right, that is applied to those parts that they say is also real. Okay. Well, Master Dharmakirti says, if it's true that all of these things exist as one whole, then when you move your hand, your whole body should move. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? Okay. If your hand, okay, is a part of your body in the same way that the cap of a pin is the same part of the cylinder of the pin, right? Together, they're a pin. Okay. Now, in the same way, your hand is a part of your body, isn't it? Yeah. Your finger's a part of your hand. Your big toe is a part of your body. Dude, everybody's yawning. I'm doing such a bad job. Oh, God. Um, okay. If it's the case that all of these things exist together as one individual whole, then what you do to one piece must also affect the other piece. So if you move your hand, that would mean that your whole body should move. Okay. Another another consequence that he poses to the Nyaya school is if you paint one of your fingers, then that should mean that your whole hand is painted blue. Okay. Does that make sense? I'm happy to try to go through the reasoning a little more. If not, think about it. Okay. If something exists as a single whole, as a single thing, then what you do to one piece of it has to affect, must affect the whole thing. Okay. So that is very clever by Master Dharmakirti. And that essentially, that just blows up the Nyaya school. Okay. Um, so one of the last, we have one more slide. This is important though. Okay. So what does it mean to make a whole thing? Okay. And the reason I have a piece of cloth here and I have a jar here and I have a lake here, okay, is because we can look at these things to understand why you need concepts and mental images in order to describe reality. Okay. There are three different ways that you must use concepts. Okay. Mental images. If everybody wants to see emptiness directly, you got to understand this. Okay. When you look at a lake, okay, you have to have one way of describing it. Okay. You have to have three different ways of describing it. Okay. You come to the lake. That lake is made up of individual molecules of water, H2O, right? Which make a whole lake. When you see that lake today, okay, and then you come back tomorrow and you see the same lake, what are you using to describe that lake? You're using the word lake, right? In the same way that you use the term redness. Okay. So we're describing qualities, right? And qualities are mental images. And if you want to understand emptiness, you have to understand how you are creating reality. Okay. And this is how you are creating reality. Okay. Through terms, through labels. Madhyamaka Prasangika, everything exists in name only. Okay. Dependent upon names. That's why I'm talking about this. Okay. So if it wasn't interesting before, I hope it's interesting now. Okay. You look at a lake, you see a lake today, and you have to come by and identify that same object, and you call it a lake, right? Now, let's say you come to the lake, but then, excuse me, let's say you come to a lake but then you go to another lake. Okay. So now you're talking about describing different lakes using the same term. Do you see how those first two differ? I'm using the word lake to describe the same lake. Okay. But I'm also using the word lake to describe different lakes too, right? A commonality between objects. Okay. One brown coffee cup, one black coffee cup. Okay. So there's something called extension. Okay. Over space and time. Okay. What does it mean to be a lake? If you have one single atom of water, excuse me, one molecule of water, is that a lake? Is one molecule of water a lake? No, Ava says no. Ava says no. So if you have two molecules of water, is that a lake? Ava says no. Okay, so at what point does water become a lake? How big? Ava just said 100, and I don't even know what that means, but she said 100. So at what point does a collection of water molecules become a lake? Okay. And this is something in Western philosophy that is called extension over space and time. Okay. So anytime, like Andreas was pointing out earlier, that if you label something, right? If you have two molecules, okay, and you combine them together into something, okay, that's your mind tying them together. It's not that they exist together as a group. Your mind is tying them together. Okay. So anytime you take two things and you combine them together, that's a mental image. Should be. Anytime you make a group. Now, I could be saying something incorrect here. So I'm hoping you guys are catching, because I said the opposite about what it means to be a person. Remember? Okay. So I'm going to move on before I confuse you guys even more. Okay. So, um, all right. Yeah. There are three ways that you use terms to describe reality. Okay. Can anybody give me the first one that I was talking about in reference to a lake? I know it's early or late, depending on where you are. Okay. The first one, okay, is you have to have a term to define a group of things. A coffee cup is a group of its handle, its color, its shape, right? And then you use the term coffee cup to refer to that thing. Okay. So you're talking about, like I was saying, extension over space and time. The more molecules you pile together, the more it becomes a coffee cup, right? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So the second way that you can refer to things using concepts is the same lake. Okay. So I come and I see a lake and I call this thing a lake. And then I come back to that same lake tomorrow. Okay. I have to have a term that I use to describe that thing. The third way, okay, that we describe reality is by commonality. So I see one lake and I call this thing a lake, but then I go 5 miles down the road and I see another lake, I have to also have a term to describe that lake. Okay. Dude, I know, I know it might not make sense why this is important. Okay. But just keep it in the back of your mind. Okay. Please. Right. So these are the ways that you're using terms and concepts to define reality. And we started off talking about what does it mean to be real? Okay. And do these terms and these labels apply to things that are more real? Okay. So what I mean by that, does the word lake, is the word lake any more or less real than a lake that you can go swimming in? Does that make sense? You see what I'm saying? It doesn't seem like when I was talking about lakes, maybe it didn't seem like this was very important. But when you think about it that way, I hope you understand why it's more interesting, okay? We've been talking about what does it mean to be real. So is a lake that I can go swimming in more real than the mental image of that lake? Okay? Is the mental image of the lake more real than the lake itself? Okay? Does the lake that I could go swimming in depend on the word lake? And does the word lake depend upon the lake that I can go swimming in? By depend, I mean dependent origination. Okay? Do concepts and archetypes depend on the actual objects? And do the actual objects depend upon the mental images? Okay? That's why we're talking about lakes. Okay? That's why I'm talking about the different ways that you can, the different types of mental images. Okay? I know it doesn't sound too interesting because I'm pretty boring. I'm not too good at explaining this stuff. But I'm getting better. Just gotta let me get better. Okay. Just keep coming and I'll get better at explaining it. Okay. Why do I have a piece of cloth up here? Okay. In the same way that a lake is made of individual water molecules, a piece of cloth is made of individual threads, isn't it? Yeah. Right. And so this jar also is made of individual pieces. Okay. Dude, thank you for giving me an extra 30 minutes. Um, so this ties it up. Okay. Um, the Nyaya school gives us a way to describe reality. Okay. Dharmakirti shows how we may be fooled by our reality. Okay. And the way that they debate their topics, okay, is really what defines our current understanding of what it means to be true or false or real or fake. Okay, so what we're going to look at next week is okay. This was all super boring stuff. Okay, next week we're going to get into, I swear, we're going to get into some real meat and bones. Okay, like we're going to start getting into like I said, today was just to give you an overview of where Master Dharmakirti uh, was going. What was he what was he debating against? And where were those ideas coming from? Okay. And what we're going to start going into next week in particular is starting to look at subtle impermanence. Okay. And we're going to start to build up in the same way that you build a house. We're going to build a foundation. We're going to put the walls up. We're going to put the roof on. Okay. So next week, we're going to start laying the foundation, which is understanding what does it mean to be changing? Okay. What does it mean to change from moment to moment? Okay. That's where Master Dharmakirti starts. Okay. And we're going to start right there too. Okay. So the first elements of the Pramana are learning exactly what does it mean to be changing. Okay. So come back, please. It'll be more in line. Next week should be more in line with stuff that you guys uh, should already have some understanding of. So it'll be more interesting, I hope. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Ava took my drink. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah.
Thank
No,
you so much.
I really like it. For me, just to be honest, because it's early, at some point after some minutes, like my gasoline runs out.
I
And
get it.
it's not that I actually think this topic was very cool, very exciting. Just like my battery, like
No, I get it. Yeah, I totally get it.
but the session, I think I like it very, very much.
All right. Well, can I ask Andreas one final thing? Um, did you get anything out of kind of how I addressed that the topic of dim and duce?
So I don't know the Tibetan terms dim and duce, but I definitely got
Yeah.
a lot out of what you talked about, the fact that um, physical, mental, and the active are all made up of parts, and
Right.
I'm starting to think about dunshis and
Yeah.
rikachis and all of that.
Good. I didn't ask you directly, so I just wanted to make sure that some things at least fell.
And I feel bad because you spent a lot of time on my questions. I appreciate
No,
that.
it's very beautiful. I'm happy to have discussions, and that's actually what I was hoping everyone would do. I've been asking for the past few sessions for people to ask questions, and I really enjoy having conversations. I find that it's very hard to do with translators. But whenever I'm sharing things in person, I like to ask questions to the person, and I like it when they ask me questions back. And I very much so feel comfortable just talking about things openly rather than in a class-like way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I
Appreciate
really appreciate it, man, and don't feel bad about it at all. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for staying in there and hanging in there.
Cool. We'll see you next week.
Okay, next week. See you
Okay.
guys.
Thank you,
Bye.
translators.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Adam, and everyone. I want to apologize. I didn't upload the other recording. I totally forgot and spaced out, but today I can upload both of them. This today and the last week.
Also, I put two documents. I put the PowerPoint in the Telegram and also put a document that I wrote up on Master Dharmakirti's view of reality and how that changes throughout the four schools. So if you want some things to look at, they're in the Telegram. All right, guys.
Okay, thank you so much. See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Angels.